from the Free Speech Union, Nick Hanne, who will have a particular view on this issue. Nick, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Good afternoon to you.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be with you.
Now, your role with the Free Speech Union, what are you doing there, mate?
Well, specifically, I'm Education Partnerships Manager. So we're looking at how we can get into universities and schools, getting the message out about free speech and the importance that it has in critical thinking for young people.
Before we go on to this particular issue to do with Hobson's pledge, how are you finding that? What has the receptiveness been of tertiary institutions to the message that you're carrying?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we certainly have a battle on our hands. There are a lot of people quietly out there in sympathy that support what we're trying to do. And I think a lot of young people are very curious. They want to know. They've heard it at home. You know, parents talk about it at home, but of course in public spaces and schools, universities, it's just not happening the way it used to. So we do have a fight, but we are starting to make some inroads, and we're getting invitations now into schools, and we are finding people who are sympathetic within universities. So it's an uphill battle, but we're getting to make progress.
Amongst that age group, though, and I'm thinking of undergraduates at universities and tertiary education's facilities now,
mm-hmm.
How are you finding their perception of free speech? Are you finding that they have the same, if you like, philosophical adherence to the concept that maybe their parents and their grandparents did, or that they're willing to have those rights truncated by whatever is the liberal flavour of the moment?
Again, I think there are young people who are open, and some have thought about it in a bit more depth. Generally speaking, though, and I think this is true, you know, when I was growing up as well, and I'm in my 40s, the average person probably didn't think that much about free speech at a sort of a principled level. So it was more often just modelled for you in schools, universities, at home, you know, in the general kind of discourse in public. And I think that's where a lot of young people now are just not seeing that example. You know, the Overton window, the number of topics you can talk about has obviously narrowed. And so they just don't go into certain areas of discourse. You know, we don't touch certain subjects anymore. And you could still have quite a free conversation with a lot of young people about certain topics, but you just know that there are some that are a minefield, and so most people just won't go near them. And I think that's where we need to be a little bit bolder and show some more courage at a societal level and say, no, hold on, let's talk about these things. And, you know, the temptation is, of course, to demonise people, and we've got to get away from that ad hominem approach, and that's been a very popular approach, sadly. But we need to get back to talking about the issues and explaining to young people, if we don't do that, then of course the issue it'll fester, it'll get worse, and then we have a train wreck further down the line. So you know, it is very much about people standing up and actually saying boldly, we need to have these conversations.
The Free Speech Union came out, I think, a couple of months ago, and last month it was, and complimented Otago University in particular.
Yes.
For a statement that they made on free speech. I just want to read that very quickly to you, the Otago University statement, at least the key part of it. And it is, although students, staff and visitors are free to criticise, contest and condemn the views expressed on campus, they should not obstruct, disrupt or otherwise interfere with the freedom of others to express those views. And that was part of that particular view. Now, it's one thing to say that, Nick. It's another thing to practice it. So you've said this is your general principle, but if you've got a liberal left lecturer marking kids down for having a disparate view from theirs, what protection do we have against that sort of, if you like, grading discrimination?
Well, you know, I think, again, personal example, you know, there's a lot of people who are quite prepared to get on their high horse and you know, say certain things, but they have to be in vogue. A lot of people aren't prepared to say the things that are unpopular at the moment. And we really do need people to stand up and actually take some risks here to their career, to their trajectory as a student even. There are students out there that are doing this. I mean, you guys have been obviously helping get the story out about Oliver Joel, this 15-year-old at New Plymouth Boys High. So these things are happening at the high school level. They're happening definitely at the university level. And we need staff and students, those who are prepared to actually really boldly get out there and do this. But again, I do emphasise, if we attack people and we go after personalities, then we're not going to win over a lot of those people who are quietly in the middle, or perhaps in sympathy but don't really come out publicly and say so. And we're not going to win them over if we do resort to just personality, driven attacks. So we've got to be able to say, look, these are the principles, let's debate them, and then we have to stick our necks up. Yeah, I would say that's key.
Kylie Quint, who I have no time for, so if you want ad hominem, I don't have any time for her because
sure.
She seems to preach and practice a special privilege and a denial of free speech, if it is anything that she considers to be anti-Brown. But anyhow, she's the Dean of Law at Auckland University of Technology. She says that the unique makeup of her university student population, which she says is 30% Pacific, I wouldn't have thought it was that high, but there you go, 15% of Maori, and with many of the largest proportion of students coming from Decile 1 schools, needs to be factored in when considering free speech on campus. And she said, quote, "Our Vice-Chancellor and our Councillor has a duty of all of those people, and not just the very small minority of people that pose a threat to their safety and well-being." This threat to their safety and well-being seems to be used as an argument, Nick, as to why you shouldn't, in actual fact, espouse views that, well, Kylie Quint doesn't agree with.
Yeah, well, it's all about infantilizing people, and it will be an incredible disservice to those who would be, traditionally viewed as minorities who've been discriminated against. That's right. So, if you want to take the view that minorities need help in order to, assert themselves in the modern sort of society of New Zealand, then we need to be able to say, well, okay, part of that is a robust debate, a place where discourse, especially a university, can really happen, where it's not, fettered by people's particular kind of worries and concerns. And if we take the therapeutic approach where everyone needs to be in counselling, we've all got to be on the shrink's couch every time someone says a cross word that might be construed as being sort of negative towards us, then I think it's pretty obvious that we're headed for disaster. So we've got to move away from that. Having said that, it's not about going after individuals, although, like you say, if you have a problem with a particular person's approach and their viewpoint, then certainly, go for it and criticise them for it. But we know that the greatest protection for minorities is, in fact, free speech and a culture of free speech. Why people, aren't prepared to take that approach when they're in positions like Kylie Quint, I don't know. I suspect there are lots of personal, reasons and a lot of ideology getting in the way. But yeah, we think that's critical. Free speech is the key for minorities to be heard.
I guess the difference between Kylie Quint and me is that I'd allow Kylie Quint on my show and we'd debate this issue. She wouldn't allow me in her lecture hall. Why are the left and the Liberals in particular on this issue of free speech? And remember, they were the ones that were raising it on university campuses back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. Why are they so opposed to its effects in the 21st century?
Well, I think we're dealing with a different left. Certainly the left of the 60s, that era was radical, but a lot of those old leftists are struggling to find a home now politically. They're probably not going to abandon their leftist identity in the most part, but I think a lot of them quietly are just wondering what's going on. I think that a lot of what they achieved in many respects is being reversed now by a lot of the progressive sort of movement. And again, there are some progressives out there who don't have an anti-free speech approach, but it does seem to characterise the progressive left.